a moment have a direct experience of the mind of our little doggy boggy. The suffering of their mind, he makes the mental suffering of that mind would be so unbearable. We would never want to waste a single second of this precious human life. And that's pretty intense. We absolutely do not think that when we think of a doggy. We don't even see the suffering of humans. We only see suffering if it's the suffering of suffering. We don't see the suffering of minds at all, unless the person is tormented, screaming down the street, you know. Oh, he must be suffering. We don't see ordinary suffering, and we absolutely do not see the minds of animals as suffering. That has never occurred to us. It's quite a shocking insight to say that. And that's because they've got the ego grasping 1 billion times more intense, 1 billion times more attachment, and 1 billion times more aversion and all the other delusions, and no access to virtues. So the predominance of that energy is ignorance. So in the next realm, more intense, more suffering, is the predominance of attachment energy, grasping. So they don't even have. So their 4 elements have manifested predominantly as air. Their mind is conjoined with air, you could say. So they're not visible to our eyes. Many people experience spirits, people who hear voices, people who see other beings. That's not an uncommon experience. They're all in this spirit realm. There's so many kinds of them. Some are very powerful, some are very fierce, some are very harmful, some are very sweet, just like all kinds of humans, you know. But unbelievable mental suffering, tortured, driven by attachment from pillar to post. So a common kind of spirit is that people experience when they're so-called possessed, you know. Or the world might call it schizophrenic. Some people are schizophrenic, their minds are really suffering, it's their own mind, but others are literally possessed by other beings who are harming them. And there's various ways, even the Tibetan doctors, just by looking at the urine, you can tell there's a spirit interfering with them. This is not an uncommon experience. So, this is one story. Geshe Lama Courtin, an amazing yogi, he lived up in the mountains, you know, in an area called Tsum, 10-day walk from Kathmandu, right and isolated, near the border of Tibet, where no foreigners would ever go. Now it's a bit more occupied, but no one ever goes there. It's just these people, these local Nepali people. So Geshe Lama Courtin meditated around that area for like 20 years in different caves, you know, because Milarepa had been in those caves. So he was in one cave, and then after 7 years, all the local yak herders freaked out and thought he was a yeti, so they chucked rocks at him. So he ran off and got into another cave. Then they chucked rocks at him there, and then he ran off. The second one, he couldn't find a cave to meditate in. So he found these overgrown juniper trees. So he sort of get himself under these overgrown juniper trees for another 1.5 years meditating. Then he got chucked out of there, and then he found this other cave, 2 hours out of this tiny village in an area called Tsum. This is all this same area, close to the border of Tibet, way up in the corner of Nepal. And so he had this cave there, and he was already there. He was living with no clothes, no food, no sleep, no nothing. But eventually the villagers, there's a lovely story. Oh, I haven't got my iPad, I could read it to you. What a pity. Let me get my iPad. Can I get my iPad? Do you mind? Precious one. Do you mind getting my iPad, Joanne?
Oh, yeah.
Do you mind?
Yeah.
It's in my room.
Sure.
Either way.
Yeah, that's okay.
It's probably plugged into my computer. It's probably on the table. Just pull the cord out. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll read this lovely. It's very moving to read this experience and how he first began to meet the villagers. You know, it's a very moving story. Anyway, this is the story. He was there in this cave, and at this point he met all the local villagers. He was like their local lama. He did divinations. They'd ask him to fix the weather, because these guys, these tantric yogis, have complete control over the internal energies, and so therefore they can control the elements as well. So you know they can move the clouds, they can bring rain. They're able to do this. It's all fitting with this model. So anyway, they'd come to him. They'd, we need rain, Geshe-la. How long? How many days for? They'd book it in and he'd get rain. You know? They'd stop it after 5 days. Things like that. So anyway. They're also, of course, clairvoyant, all these things. So, this one time, he was in another cave for a while, 12 hours away. So he was taking care of the monastery and the nunnery and all that. And the nuns, one of the nuns went kind of potty, you know, so she got possessed, basically. I'll explain. So anyway, they were really distressed, and they walked up this mountain for 12 hours to get Genla, because there's no phones. Genla Annie Tenzin's gone crazy, Annie Tenzin's gone crazy. So he said, oh, I'll fix it, don't worry. So they sat there and he ran down the hill because he could walk on the air. He whizzed down like an hour, so he can whiz down quick on the air because he can control all the elements, So as he's moving into the nunnery, there's this nun sitting in the bed with his very deep voice, which is, she's possessed. That's what happens. These spirits, they want something because it's attachment, and many of these spirits, why they enter into people and use their bodies is because they've got something they're attached to. They're either very attached to the person or possession that they have. They want it. So this is often why they do the possessing. Or they harm you. Many stories, so many stories, So this nun is in the bed. So Genla comes in and he goes to the nun and he says, what do you want? He's talking to the spirit. What do you want? Why are you there? And what do you want? I want my pink thermos with the white flowers. I want my pink thermos with the white flowers. And there it was. And they remembered that a local villager who died recently had given the nun a thermos of tea. And up in these villages, they had like no possessions, It's like probably having gold, having a thermos. And she didn't give it back. And he was annoyed, upset, attached, angry. So he died like that. He got born as a spirit. He ran to his thermos. So he comes and enters her because he wants his thermos. This is a thermos, people. Be careful what you're attached to. Please. Oh. Thank you, darling. So anyway, there it was. So Genla, so that's the connection. The spirit runs to get their thing because they're so attached to it. Attachment is really this energy that drives us from pillar to post to whatever it is we think we want. So this poor spirit's driven by this, just they're completely demented, driven only by attachment. No choice. Like a nightmare, and so suffering. So what they have to do is to cut the connection. So in this case, because Genla knew the spirit, the villager, and the villager recognised Genla too. It's another person, it's a person, but he recognised Genla, So anyway, they had to get the thermos and give it away and make something useful with it, like create merit, and that helps the spirit. That cuts the connection. So normally, when they don't know who the spirit is, I know one time in Kopan, one girl went completely potty, and Genla said yes, because she's got a possession. You look in her suitcase, you'll find it. It was this Jewish object. She was Jewish, and her father had bought it in an antique store. This makes me think twice about antiques now. The person obviously who had possessed it before is a spirit now, and he wants his damn thing. He's annoyed maybe she's become a Buddhist or something. So he's possessed her, and she's out of it, she's berserk. So what he did with her, and I've seen them do this, they have to threaten the spirit. They throw the object away, in this case, and he shouts and yells at the person, meaning the spirit. He's whacking the girl with a shoe, shouting at the spirit. We know what about you, you go now, you go, Sometimes I was open, apparently, we never use wrathful methods, we use peaceful methods. So one time in Malaysia, apparently he spent hours trying to cajole the spirit to leave this woman. So finally the spirit agreed to have a cup of tea and then they'd go. He didn't whack them, I've seen the lovers whack them. So anyway, that's to make the spirit go away. But sometimes when the connection is very strong, nothing will make the spirit go away. Just you live with them, you go crazy. I remember one woman who wrote to me out of the blue from Canada. She emailed me for a while. She was so, and I trusted her view. I mean, based on these teachings, what do I know? I'm just telling you. But I trusted her story. But one day she's sitting in a cafe and all of a sudden, violently to the left, on her left side, this beings, she said it was plural, went in front of her. So she lived with these beings day and night. They would torture her, abuse her, constantly screaming and yelling, constantly abusing her, brutalising, squashing her inside. I've heard about another woman who said she was being raped by these spirits. Okay, the world thinks they're insane and says they're making up stories, but I'm taking the stories given these beings harming her. She eventually, she was a local lama, she went to the lama, she had pujas done, lamas over did pujas, nothing would make them go away. And because it was so intense for her, she couldn't contain herself. So she probably went to see the doctors, then her father said I couldn't get hold of her anymore. The father obviously locked her up, Some people live like this. People in insane asylums. One old lama visited some insane asylum, or whatever the right word is, mental hospital. In Spain, years ago, he said, yeah, they're all possessed, Very interesting. I mean, we don't accept this in our culture. I'm telling you, this is Buddhist view. Intense suffering, unbelievable suffering, So there's none. The spirit goes. No, even before the spirit left, it was so poignant. It was very insightful. He said, he was kind of crying. I can't find my way. I can't find my way. Meaning you're so driven by attachment, you can't do anything. You just get pushed by attachment. You're kind of berserk, So then again, I did special prayers and things and helped him, it seems, get a human rebirth. That's the power of these farmers. Anyway, that's something that destroys spirits. So they're attached to things. And attachment, I mean, look at us. Look at people who are attached, who hoard. I mean, we're all attached, but look at hoarding, the most unbelievable level of attachment. And it's usually repulsive, and there's shit and piss and revolting, smelly, mouldy things, and they cannot give one single one of them away. Can you only imagine the torture of that mind? This is attachment to a thermos. Do you understand? This fellow was attached to his Jewish thing. We're all attached. We don't see the danger. Attached to people, but Siamese twin. More than that. Born to dogs' wounds and cows' wounds and, lions' wounds. Look at bees, or creatures. The mother bee. Her job is to make babies. She is a sex machine. That's what she does. Gives birth to babies. Where do you think that comes from? Think about it. I mean, honour bees, they're very amazing, but think about it. She's a sentient being, and she's a baby machine. You hear about bugs on the ground like that too, these kind of, slugs and things. That's what they do, give birth to billions and billions of babies. I'm watching one of those television shows, Attenborough. He's like that amazing Australian fellow, but he's got an English accent. They're both he's classically English, and other bloke's classically Australian. They're both hilarious. They're both super enthusiastic. So one bloke talks like that, and one talks like that. They're both the same, they're amazing. Anyway, I'll never forget this one show. It was in Africa somewhere, and it's wildlife. So one was this anthill. These ants. And he said, nobody understands why they're getting more technologically brilliant as time goes by. The complications of how they work out together. It's 22.4 degrees here, and they do this here, and therefore this. All these little billions of little beings all working together to create this astonishing technological, and they're becoming more technologically intelligent, and we can't see why. Well, guess why? Who do you think is an ant looking like that? Engineers, architects, mathematicians. But do it with attachment. So the skill, whatever skill you have, whatever thing you do with your mind, it continues. But if it's done with attachment, you get born as a clever ant. If it's done as virtue, you get born as a human. But the skills are the same. Look at humans with animal tendencies. Look at humans, like animals. Sex, eating, killing, torturing. They're animal tendencies. Not being rude to animals. The senses, uncontrolled senses. Nothing goes astray. And then it depends on what you do. The harming others, you can't even do those with virtue, so forget that. But even virtuous things we do, but harm motivated by, clever things like being a brilliant dancer. There's another, in the same film, I remember, there was one bird that spent 9 hours every day dancing to attract a girl. All I saw was a ballet dancer, Architects, there's one other bird, builds a house all day. Architects. They keep the skills, but you just do it clumsily because you're a bird now. Because you want it with attachment. You do it with attachment. The world does everything with attachment. We honour the skill, we don't see the motive. I'm just talking. I'm just doing an analysis based on what I understand about Buddhism. I'm not saying I'm right. This is how karma works. So whatever we do, this is the Mahayana path now. To have a pure motivation. Given that we have to eat, sleep and go to the toilet and have sex and drugs and rock and roll or whatever, at least do it with a virtuous motivation. That's what transforms it. That's what's so amazing in the Mahayana path. In the first level, there's no wiggle room. You just control yourself. You have discipline. That's excellent. That's a foundation. But given that most of us won't go to the mountain and become yogis, most of us won't even give up sex, drugs and rock and roll and become monks or nuns, so at least do it with virtue. Do it with motivation to be a benefit to others. Do it with bodhicitta. Then everything you do becomes a cause for enlightenment. This is technical, not some holy idea. It's technical. But when we do karma, remember the motivation is the key. Even a negative action done with a pure motivation can still create virtue. That's the power of motivation. You meant well. It doesn't mean you help the sentient being, but you meant well. That even can be some virtue. It's not a helpful habit to have to keep wanting to steal. If it's done with pure motivation. Really, it can be pure sometimes, it really can be. But it can't be that pure because still the action is harmful. But if you're a high being, you can even... Okay, bodhisattvas, Bodhisattvas, the first level of vows is the pratimoksha, the vows according to individual liberation, the vows of not killing, not stealing, not lying, and the monks and nuns' vows. They're the first level of practice, junior school and high school, like we talked yesterday. And they're the vows to help you refrain from harming. That's the bottom line. That's that level of practice. You refrain from harming. The next level are the bodhisattva vows, which are way more powerful. They are to help you benefit others. Not harm others, but to benefit others. It's a proactive level of morality to help others. So in those vows, which are way more powerful, the key factor that determines whether you break a vow is the motivation for doing it, the motivation. In the first level, it's just the doing of it that causes you to break a vow. So the bodhisattva one, for example, you have a vow there to break an earlier vow if it will benefit the sentient being. You can't pretend with this lot. It's got to be a genuine pure motivation based on wisdom, that doing that action of stealing, doing that action of lying was genuinely of benefit, not just get yourself out of trouble, which is often what we kid ourselves about. That's what Andrew's example. Where's Andrew? He's gone. Are you there? Okay. Can you hear my point, Andrew? Yep. So that's what it's such about, but that's dangerous if we're not careful, And even then, all the vows are like more to do to help what's best for the other person. Not just to help them and be nice to them, but what's best for the other person. So for example, there's a vow, all the secondary vows, there are 46 of them. Each of them is grouped in terms of each of the 6 perfections. So a bunch of them help you develop generosity. A bunch help you practice patience, etc., etc. So the generosity vows is a vow in there that, let's say, you offer me, you ring me up and say, come out for dinner a bit. I'd like to offer you some dinner. And I'm kind of lazy. Oh no, darling, thank you so much, another day. I broke a bodhisattva vow. My motivation was lousy. And why I broke a vow was because the job of the bodhisattva vows is to help us do what's best for the other person. And the bottom line is to help another person create merit. So I prevented you from creating merit by saying no. So I broke a vow. That's powerful. We think of helping others being all kind of gooey and nice, No, it's to do an action that is best for them. That's like what we call tough love if you're a good parent. That's that level. Very powerful, But even, like I said, so there's always this story they tell of the Buddha, one of his past lives. He was this captain on a boat. It's a classic story that's always told in the text. As an example of like a heavy negative action, the heaviest you can find if you like is killing, one of them. But because it was done with such a pure motivation, and not only did he not create any negative karma, it hastened his enlightenment. So the story goes, he's already a high degree bodhisattva, with, obviously realization of emptiness, clairvoyance, bodhicitta, incredibly highly realized. And he's clearly clairvoyant, that's what comes early. So he's on this boat, 500 merchants or something, and he sees that someone else is, one of them is going to kill everybody and take everything for himself. So he had such compassion for the perp, not for the 499 victims as well as them, but for this person, the heavy negative karma he would have created, that he'd go to the hell realms. He was so overwhelmed by compassion for this person, he decided he would rather go to the hell realms instead. I will happily kill him and take on the suffering and go to the hell realms. That's like Tonglen. Talk about Tonglen, taking on someone else's suffering. You don't take on their suffering, but you'd rather suffer instead of them. It's like you jump in front of the bus, let me suffer instead. That's like that. So the story goes, not only did he not create negative karma, that's the Mahayana interpretation, he actually hastened his Buddhahood because his compassion was so stupendous. Wow. That's logical, but it's not comfortable if we really think it through. And unless we understand the Bodhisattva teachings, this makes no sense. Because if you're on that boat and you saw some dude kill somebody, I'm sorry, you wouldn't see some fellow with a halo. That's my point. How dare he kill that person, put him in prison? We would never know he's a bodhisattva. And he's not going to say, oh, bodhisattva, I'm allowed to do it. No. He doesn't care. So that's why the Tibetans say you don't know who anybody is, don't judge. Very powerful.
Incredible.
Yeah, blah, blah, yeah. Any questions, people? I'm sorry. Did you have something I'm supposed to talk about? I was reading on. Huh? Where? Yes, we have.
I have a question. One of the lines in the Heart Sutra is emptiness is not other than form.
Okay.
Form is also
let's talk about it. Okay, back to emptiness. Totally
Are
new.
you going to tell us a story
What?
on the laptop?
What?
I mean, on your tablet, you're going to tell a story.
I was. It'll come later.
Oh,
It'll come. Okay, let's discuss that. All right. So I'm going to go into a bit of detail here. So first of all, the Heart Sutra is basically a list. Always know this and know that. There's no structure, there's no heading, so you can't tell. But basically what Buddha's doing, or Shariputra, channeling Buddha, is listing the various categories of phenomena according to this worldview. So the first lot are the 5 aggregates. There it is, you see. Form, feeling, discrimination, composite factors, and consciousness. That's the first category. And that's Buddha's assessment of what a person is made of. 5 different components. He's got certain logic to all that. The next category of phenomena is the next 6 are the starting from no I, are the 6 senses, and they mean by the 6th one is called no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. So no mind is really the mental consciousness. It's not really technically a sense. They refer to it as the 6 ways our consciousness work, the 5 senses and mental consciousness. The next 6 starting as the object of those senses, the no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, and no object, and no phenomenon. So the objects of those 6. And then there's a third lot, which is a subtle physical energy related to these. So these are called the 18 constituents. Very specific definitions and structure of all these things. Then you've got no 12 links, up to ignorance and so on, up to aging and death. That's the 12 links of dependent arising. Then you've got the 4 noble truths, suffering, origination, cessation, and path. Then you've got wisdom, and no wisdom, and then no attainment, all these things. So it's all the categories of phenomena according to the Buddhist worldview. And what he's saying is basically that within emptiness, he says, within emptiness, within the fact of non-inherent existence, within that fact, there are no this and no that. So, here he says, form is empty. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. So let's look at that. Okay. This is the 2 truths, ensuring we don't become nihilistic. So like I said before, use the example of Shannon. Shannon is now not colourblind. And he has expected yellow because he's used to seeing yellow. We've now fixed the problem. We present the red to him, but because he's got a conception in his mind, an expectation, hasn't he, of yellow, and he gets a shock. Oh my God, it's not yellow. So the name of that phenomenon that his mind cognized, as we said, is called the absence of yellow. His mind just cognized a phenomenon called the absence of yellow. We get that, don't we? Okay, now, good. So, full stop, next sentence. This cup is red, right? We agree red. Okay, put it these terms. Do we agree that red exists on this cup? There's a phenomenon called a cup, and one of its characteristics is red paint, isn't it? Do we agree with that? Do we agree with that? So you could say red is cup, and cup is red. Red is nothing other than cup, and cup is nothing other than red. Can you hear those words? That means you can never find this red here without a cup, can you? You couldn't do that, could you? Do you hear me? Yeah. This red exists here on the cup. Mm-hmm. You can't separate the red from this cup, can you? It's a characteristic of this cup. So wherever there is this cup, you will find red. Mm-hmm. And wherever there is this red, you will find the cup. They exist together, don't they? Can you hear that? Yeah. So now, next one. It is not yellow. So do you accept that the phenomenon called red is a phenomenon that does exist on this cup that we can cognize? You got it? Yes. So for him, do you accept that when Shannon sees it for the first time with his clean eyes, what he will see is the absence of yellow? You with me? So the phenomenon that he cognized existing on this red cup is the absence of yellow. Do you get it? The song's being tricky. You've got to get your head around the thoughts. Can you hear this? I'll say it again. Because he expected yellow, his eyes are now fixed. He is now cognizing on this red cup another phenomenon called the absence of yellow. You accept that? So, wherever there is red cup, there is the absence of yellow cup. And wherever there is the absence of yellow cup, there is a red cup. Do you accept that? Okay, good. So here it says, form, which is one of the first aggregates, is empty of inherent existence. That's what it's saying. Red cup is empty of being yellow. Form is empty of inherent existence. And then that emptiness of inherent existence, right? That emptiness of inherent existence of form, that emptiness of inherent existence of form, where does it exist? Where does the emptiness of inherent existence of form exist? Where does absence of yellow cup exist? On a red cup. Wherever there is absence of yellow cup, there is a red cup. So if form is empty of inherent existence, then that emptiness of inherent existence of form exists right on the form. Can you hear that? That's form. That's a conventional reality called form. So it is empty of inherent existence. So wherever there is the emptiness of inherent existence of form, there is form. And wherever there is form, you will find a characteristic inseparable from it called emptiness of inherent existence. Can you hear that? That's the two truths together. You can never become nihilistic. That's what that means. Is that useful? Who asked me? Is that the answer? Did you get it?
Yes, what I'm not so clear on the second line.
Well, it's another way of saying it. Emptiness is not other than form, and form is also not other than emptiness. What it's saying is you'll never find conventional form without emptiness of inherent form. That's all it's meaning. It was not clear, say it to you. What's the question?
No, it's not entirely clear. Why, if I put it to the...
What?
Okay, so when it says form is empty and emptiness is form,
Yeah.
The following line is saying something extra.
Where? Show me where.
I'm asking.
No, read it out.
Where's the next? Okay, so emptiness is not other than form.
Yeah.
Form is also not other than emptiness.
It's another way of saying the first sentence.
So they have the same meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. He's just spelling it out. He's just spelling it out. But emptiness, you've got to see, shorthand is emptiness. It's really, in this case, it's the emptiness of inherent form. Can you hear that?
Yes, yes.
But emptiness of yellow cup. So the emptiness, spelling it out is, so emptiness of inherent form has to exist absolutely where there is conventional form.
Yes.
And the emptiness of inherent form exists where there is form, and form exists where there is emptiness of inherent form. That's the two truths. They're together, and that stops you from being nihilistic. Another way of saying the first sentence.
Okay. Yeah.
That's all. I mean, technically it's not true that emptiness is form. It's just not true, but that's the explanation of it. You hear me? I mean, these are just weird concepts. Like any concepts, once you learn them and get used to them and put meat on the bones of them, we can speak them, isn't it? That's what we have to do. And when you start talking about IPs and UPs and browsers, I get confused because I haven't got the definitions clear. But any body of knowledge is like that. But what we do is we mystify emptiness. Oh, I've been thinking about it for 30 years and I still don't understand. Well, I say, well, let's start. What's the definition? Oh, I don't know. Well, how can you understand if you don't know the definition even? Can't even start. I've been thinking about cups for 30 years. What's a cup? Oh, I don't know. Well, how do you think about it? Don't have words. Are we communicating? This is telling us that this is the point. This is wherever there is the conventional I, you will find right here on this conventional I the emptiness of intrinsic I. And wherever you find even more precise, wherever there is conventional Robina, you will find the emptiness of inherent Robina right there. So wherever there is Robina, there is an absence of inherent Robina. And wherever there is the absence of inherent Robina, there is Robina. That's conventional, that's the ultimate. They're together, two truths. Therefore you can't fall into the abyss of the great mistake. Can you hear the point?
Yeah.
Okay, I put my hand in the pocket, looking for my $5. I got my hand, I go, oh! What did I just discover?
Not there.
Emptiness of $5. So where would $5 have existed if it were there? In the pocket. So where does the emptiness of $5 exist? In the pocket.
Yep.
So wherever there is pocket, there is absence of $5. And wherever there is absence of $5, there is pocket. They go together, the two truths. other than there's no I, or there is an I. They're completely extreme, ridiculous, demented, unconnected concepts. And that's how we live now, with our ego grasping. So once we're on the track, Tom Carper says, when we hear, instead of the extreme views, there's no inherent I, and you fall off into the abyss of the great mistake, oh, well, there's no I, I kill myself. And then the other is, there is an I, oh, thank God, grass. They're the two extreme views. We are opposite to reality. So once we even start intellectually hearing how conventional I, an I that exists in dependence upon things, is the same meaning as the I that lacks independence. A dependent I is the same as saying empty of independent I. That's all, the flip side. And then we start to come together towards the middle way. Then we're on the right track. Then we are on the right track. And this is the major danger about emptiness. Thinking it's nihilism. It's the major danger. So just getting our head around the idea of an emptiness. It sounds abstract, and it is. It's like a negative number, the emptiness of something. But it has massive meaning. We can hear that idea that the only time a person ever sees the emptiness of something is when you expected something else to be there. The only person who sees the absence of $5 is the person who expects $5. The only person who sees the absence of cancer is the person who thought there was cancer. The only person who thinks there's emptiness of tea is the person who thought there was tea. It's this really important point to get. Not just emptiness of something, that's too abstract. I mean, you can talk about emptiness of anything. There's no elephant in this room, but who cares? No one thought there should be. So don't bother us being intellectual about it. You see my point? Yes. It's a really powerful point, that one. It's contingent on an expectation, on a thought, an idea that's opposite the truth. That's why it's a shock to find it. And also the other point is, the way the mind cognizes, always it cognizes phenomena. So there can be an abstract phenomenon called the absence of something. It's a phenomenon. It's a real phenomenon that does exist. The real phenomenon called the absence of $5 really does exist in my pocket. It's really precise thought. You get my point? You've got to hear it like that. That's how they talk in the philosophy. That's why we're so confused, until we understand this point.
Interesting.
You can't just make up emptinesses. Like there's no elephant on my table. Who cares? No one expected there to be. So don't bother. It's not intellectual. It's a meaningful point. So again, the Buddha says, in Singapore concentration, with the microscope of our mind, after years and if not lifetimes of constant practice, constant purification, constant analysis, constant debate and analysis, and thinking and studying, one day, finally, after years of experience, the penny will drop, and we will see for the first time. They call it a direct, non-conceptual insight into, a direct, non-conceptual, an experiential insight into the fact that there has never been, isn't, and could never be the fantasy I, the independent I, the inherent I. This is also an interesting point. This is also a fascinating point. Why this is so confusing to us is because we don't know what an independent I would be if it existed. We just blindly believe it. We don't give it words. So the Buddha says that the only way to find the absence of the inherent I is by identifying what you think an inherent I would be if it did exist. And this is the tricky part. In other words, you know, if there's a whole bunch of pieces of paper on a table, a whole bunch of pictures and pieces of paper, lots of pieces of paper, and I say to you, please go and sit on that table and see if you can find my $5. But you've never heard of $5. You've never heard of even what it means. The best you know is it's a piece of paper. You with me, people? You can look on that table till the cows come home. You will never find either $5 or the absence of $5 until you recognise $5. That's an easy one because $5 could exist. So that's easy. But you look on that table and it can be staring right there and in front of you. But if you can't know in your mind what $5 is, you will never ever either see the $5 or you'll never be confident that there's the absence of $5. You get my point? So you have to know, and that's why they say in the analysis of emptiness, the first thing we have to recognize, the first thing we have to think about is we have to identify the object to be negated. And this is the hardest part. Lama Yeshe says Mahamudra, once you've got that clear, exactly what you think an inherent I would be, if it existed, that second, you will recognize the emptiness of it. That second. So once you've established what $5 is, once you know, you will find in a minute either of two things. You will find the $5 and give it to me, or you will find the absence of $5. But only when you know what $5 is. That's the part that's hard. So why don't I read you about Geshe of a contract, this amazing yogi. Where's the book, I wonder? I always forget writing it. Oops, the other one. Oh no. There was this biography of a secret joke. About 10 years ago, that was when I was in Puerto Rico, I began this biography, especially on the contract. I worked for years on it, and then Tenzin Zopa, his attendant, said, stop working on it. So I gave it back to him 10 years ago, 12 years ago. That time we took it up again. It's an amazing story. Very moving, I tell you. So this here he was. He's on the contract. When he was born in Tibet, early 30s, I think. And then he went to Sarah J as a little boy. A great yogi, very special, very incredible, very unusual, very independent, did exactly what he wanted, studied like crazy, learned all the tunes, knew every single tune, all his amazing voice, hung out with his nuns over here and learned these tunes, hung out with those dudes over there. He was very independent, gathered all this incredible knowledge. He was amazing with medicine, he was amazing with the herbs, he was amazing with many, he was really kind of an extraordinary person. So anyway, he escaped and went, he escaped from the mountains on his own or something, and went to Nepal, met all his friends, saw his guru, and his guru told him to go and meditate. So on his way back from Tibet, he had visited on the border this place in Tsum, which is an area where Milarepa used to meditate. And he left his few things. He had one little pack with a sheepskin and texts. He had texts of all the four traditions. He always studied all four traditions, and a bunch of texts in a little pack. So he left it at this house and said, I'll be back for them. So he went to Kathmandu, then he came, his guru said go, so he just disappeared, just walked away, went up to the mountains, got his little pack, and then found this cave. So he spent his first 7 years in that cave, and that's in this cave. He just disappeared off the face of the earth, no one knew where he was. That's what real yogis do. Just turn away and don't come back. Wow. Where is it? It's the preface. It's the prologue of the book. Wow. So this is in the voice of Geshe Tenzin Zopa, his attendant. Prologue. In the afternoon of an early spring day in 1965, the yak herder Pasang was climbing the mountains above his village, Burshi, not far from the border of Tibet in northwest Nepal. Pasang was looking for his yaks, which he had sent out to pasture that morning. The mountains facing the north were extremely dry with very little grass. Following their tracks, he could see that they'd gone further up than usual. He'd never been this far before. It was very rugged countryside and not easy to get to. Normally yaks are quite haphazard in their eating habits. Left alone, they graze here and there, gradually moving on and up. They can go for miles in a day, eating their way into very dangerous situations. Many animals fall over the cliffs. Pasang crossed the waterfall and could see them a few hundred yards away, grazing up the mountainside. He needed to find the lead yaks so he could herd them down. There were 10 of them. Show, come, he shouted. Suddenly he noticed just above the yaks a person. He wasn't even sure it was a person, sitting in a hole in a rock face. He squinted his eyes and took a careful look to make sure he wasn't imagining things. He didn't know what to think. The person seemed huge and his hair was matted and long. He was wearing virtually nothing, just a piece of red cloth below his waist. There were caves up there, and one of them, the Cave of the Doves, is famous for being the home 900 years earlier of the great Milarepa. But no one lived there now, not these days, Pasang thought to himself. Who knew who this was? He wondered if it was a yeti. In the mountains there's a strong belief in the existence of these mythical beings, said to be a bit like a gorilla. Or it could be even a demon. If it's a man, he must be crazy. What's he doing up there on his own in the middle of nowhere? Pasang was alone. It was getting dark. The clouds were moving quickly across the sky, covering the top of the mountains. He was scared. He gathered his yaks and got out of there. Back at Bushi, the villagers decided that they had to get rid of this intruder. Whoever he was, they didn't feel good about him. They were genuinely fearful that he would bring harm to the village. The next day, Pasang led two of his friends up the mountain to check out this apparition, armed with their slingshots. Up there, look, do you see him, he said. They shot several rocks at the figure, hoping to scare him away. The next thing they see is this person carrying a small pack on his back, rushing out of the cave and almost flying up the mountain, hardly touching the ground as he went. They couldn't believe their eyes, but they were relieved. Now he was gone. 2 years later, a 4-hour walk west of the Cave of the Doves, the old monk Rinchen Wangchuk was returning to his tiny house in Ganden Mountain, where he lived in meditation. He'd made the house from rocks years ago and spent the winters here, coming down from Mugompa, his monastery, 8 hours further up the mountain on the route to Tibet. Now that he was old, he wanted to spend all his time in his little hut in solitary retreat. He could have found a suitable place in his monastery. It's on one of the highest peaks and is one of the most isolated places in the region. But he knew that Ganden Mountain was blessed by the energy of Vajrayogini and Hayagriva, and always the best place to meditate is a place that's been blessed by the presence of the holy beings. And of course, the great Milarepa had laid his holy feet on these mountains hundreds of years before. He had a close relationship with the people of Chokangpa, one of the nearby villages where he was born. From his hut, he would visit his relatives for roasted barley flour, tsampa, and other supplies, and of course to perform prayers for them. He was happy in his retreat place, isolated from the village and in sight of no one. But in the spring of 1967, he found that he had a neighbour. It was late afternoon. He was returning from the village with supplies, but for some reason he took a different route, one he'd never used before. About 10 minutes from his hut, when he glanced over to the northeast, he noticed something moving among the rocks higher up. There seemed to be a person outside what looked like a cave. The mist was already falling, so it was not so clear. For 2 years now, there had been rumours circulating around the villages about a mysterious person, a madman perhaps, even a yeti, who had been chased away from the Cave of the Doves by the villagers of Bushi. He was a bit anxious at first. He wasn't sure whether it was a person or indeed whether the fears of the villagers were based in reality. When you're in retreat, you want to be isolated, and he didn't know what to think about this new presence. Back in his hut, he couldn't get this stranger out of his mind. The very next morning, after his pre-dawn meditation session, he did some investigation. He went to the spot from where he'd seen the movement. He watched until the sun not only touched the cave, but was shining on the village in the valley. But this time, he didn't see any sign of life, nothing. He was reluctant to go there. It could be a yeti after all. Although irrational, he just wasn't sure. But now he was really curious. His mind was full of it all day. He couldn't even meditate well. Again, next morning, he went to look. Again, nothing. This time he decided he'd go to the cave itself and find out. He made his way stealthily through the bushes, a 10-minute trek through the brush and up the mountain. He was to the left of the cave, but because of the rocks in his path, he couldn't see inside. He crept closer, but still kept to the side, throwing a stone onto the rocky outcrop that formed the roof. 4 times he threw stones, but nothing happened. Then he crept around to the front of the cave and looked inside the doorway, a hole in the rock face. There was a man, almost naked, sitting unmoving in meditation. He seemed so powerful, huge, strong. Rinchen Wangchuk was amazed by his presence. Even though his hair was down his back and wild-looking, he could see that the meditator was a monk. He was wearing just a piece of his maroon robes covering his secret parts, with the rest of his body naked. His palms weren't in his lap in the usual meditation mudra, but open, each hand resting upwards on each knee, his thumbs curled inwards, resting in the palm. He had long, straggly whiskers hanging down either side of his mouth, but almost no hair on his upper lip or on his chin. His face was very rough, dark and weather-beaten. The cave was bare, nothing at all, just this meditator sitting on a worn animal skin on the hard, rocky ground. Rinchen Monchuk couldn't imagine how he could survive like this. And who was he? He decided this must be the person the Bushi villagers thought was a yeti, the person they'd chased away. He stood at the open doorway for a long time, just watching this amazing man meditate. But his mind was full of so many conflicting thoughts. Maybe he was crazy. How could someone live like this? He, of course, knew all the stories about Milarepa, one of the most beloved and successful meditators of Tibetan history. Everyone knew them. How he left the world and gone to the mountains, moving from cave to cave, naked, living on nettles, and eventually gaining the supreme goal of enlightenment. His songs are known and loved by all Tibetans and their Nepalese Buddhist neighbours. Reading about this is one thing, but to see someone looking just like Milarepa would have looked, living in a bare cave for who knows how long, was something else. It was hard to believe. It seemed impossible. It was certainly the first time that Rinchen Monchuk had witnessed such a yogi. Of course, he had received initiations himself into the highest practices during his time in Tibet, but seeing someone actually embodying the practice in such a radical way, that was not something within his experience. He was also beginning to feel a little embarrassed. And if this man really was a great meditator, how rude to disturb him like this, throwing stones. He decided to return to his hut. But the image of this yogi overwhelmed him during his own meditation sessions. He couldn't think of anything else. He began to feel very good about him, very safe somehow. He was drawn to him and wanted to get his own sessions finished quickly so that he could go back to the cave. On the fourth day, after his mid-morning session, he went back. Again, there was the yogi, in meditation. Nothing had changed since yesterday. He was absolutely still, unmoving, like a rock. Rinchen Monchuk couldn't contain himself. He was compelled to talk to him. From the doorway, he quietly said, "May I know who you are? May I offer you some food?" There was no reply, no acknowledgement, nothing. The meditator remained in samadhi. Rinchen Monchuk was becoming convinced that here was a genuine practitioner and he was yearning to connect with him. He longed to receive teachings from this holy being. Again he asked his question, and again. But again, nothing. And he watched him for a long time, then left. He cooked his lunch, did his afternoon session, thinking about the yogi who filled his mind. He returned to the cave. Now he sat on the ground just in front of the door of the cave with the afternoon sun at his back. He was just a few feet from the meditator who was sitting facing the doorway. His heart reached out to him. There was no sign of any food. He said very quietly, "You must eat food. I have food. May I offer you some?" No response. Clearly his efforts were getting him nowhere. Perhaps he was pushing too hard. Perhaps he'd better just leave him alone. But he couldn't let go of it. He had to meet this great yogi and receive his teachings. To receive personal instructions from someone who had direct experience of the practices was a rare and precious thing. He yearned for realizations himself and could not bear to turn away from this unbelievable opportunity. After a restless night, he returned to the cave as soon as he had finished his pre-dawn session. But this time he brought an offering, something auspicious. His small wooden bowl piled high with barley grain and a lump of salt. The grains for growth, expansion, and the salt when offered to a lama for the wealth of Dharma. The meditator was there as usual, naked in samadhi. Rinchen Monchuk knelt in front of him, holding his gift high. He extended it towards him. "May this offering create a spiritual relationship between us. May I know who you are. Where are you from?" The yogi opened his eyes and spoke. "I am nobody. Leave me alone." His gaze was almost unbearable, powerful, piercing, steady. His voice was soft, but his words were firm. Rinchen Monchuk's heart was beating fast. He implored him, I am requesting sincerely that you teach me the Dharma. It's not possible, the yogi replied. But nothing could stop Rinchen Mongtruk now. Whatever you demand of me, I am ready to follow. I will do exactly as you instruct. The yogi hadn't moved, his palms still resting upwards on his knees, his legs in full lotus position. After a long silence, he said, "What you're watching is harder than you can imagine. But I'm ready, I promise. Please teach me. I've stayed at Mugompa for 40 years, and I have studied in Tibet. Now I yearn to practice seriously and gain realizations. But I feel that I lack the blessings of the realized gurus. I am convinced you must be a great yogi. I beg you to give me teachings." The yogi kept his gaze on the old monk bent low before him. "If you follow me, you must stay in retreat for the rest of your life. If you can do that, I will give you initiations and the commentaries and guide you in your meditations." Rinchen Mongtruk was ecstatic, unbelievable, like finding a treasure. He had found a lama, a true knowledge holder. At last he could achieve the purpose of his life, the realizations of the truth, just like all the holy beings of the past, right back to Lord Buddha himself. But this must not go beyond us, the yogi said. "I have vowed to spend the rest of my life in solitary retreat, isolated from everyone. No one must know. I promise I will do exactly as you say." That's the prologue. I think we all need one of them, don't you? Spiritual teacher.
Yes.
You're going to give your heart to somebody, you might as well choose somebody decent. But Bhagavad Gita says, choose your guru very carefully, you're going to end up like them. He doesn't say it like that, that's what he's saying. There's another beautiful chapter here. Tenzin Zopa, he's attendant, Geshe Tenzin Zopa now. He's been here, I think, isn't he? He's been to Queensland. He lived in Australia for a couple of years. Because the reincarnation of Geshe was recognised, and then Tenzin Zopa brought him to Australia and lived in Perth for a couple of years, going to one of those schools there, one of those alternative schools, you know the ones? What are they called? That time, yeah, right. So now he's in Sarah J, the monk. He's Geshe Tenzin reincarnation. But Tenzin Zopa now, I think he's got an Australian passport, he's in Australia a lot. He's now a Geshe. So anyway, this is what I interviewed him, got all these stories out there. And then I wrote it in his voice. But the thing was, he's one of, the first chapter is him when he first met Geshe Tenzin. I asked him, when did you first meet him? "Oh, I met him when I came out of my mother's womb," he said. So he told the story. His mummy was one of several children, and two of her sisters were nuns, his aunties. So, and then by this point they'd known Geshe Tenzin, because Geshe Tenzin actually put the mother together with the father, who'd been who lived in Tibet and used to carry the bag of the 14th Dalai Lama when he was young or something. Some lovely story. So that's Tenzin Zopa's father, so there were 6 children. So he was one of the children. And when he got born, he was the youngest, maybe the oldest, I can't remember. So when he got born, his mother was having really serious problems coming out. He was blocked or something. And the 2 aunties were there, and all of a sudden Genma turns up from his cave. He must have known he came. And so there was real problems having him come out. This is when he told the story. He was coming out bum first, or legs first, or something, and he was stuck. That's how he told the story. So what happened was Genma told one of the aunties, "Get some butter." So she got some butter, and it rolled into a piece. Then he blew mantras on it, and then he gave it to the mother to please eat it. So she ate the butter. So then she said, "Suddenly, apparently, I turned around in the womb. I went up first, turned around and came out, and the butter was on my crown." That's what they say. That's sweet. I like those stories. That's the opening chapter. So anyway, he was in love with his, he called him Mei Lama. He thought it was his grandfather. He used to run up to the cave and spend time with him. This is the cave he's talking about now. No, this other cave, not this one. So anyway, that's where the cave where Pasan met him, Rinchen Mongtruk met him. Yeah. So anyway, so I interviewed all these people trying to get these stories out of Tenzin Zopa and all these different people, writing it all down. But there was also the auntie. I was in Kopan interviewing all the time, and the auntie was there because now the reincarnation was in Kopan, and I was interviewing Tenzin Zopa and I said, should I interview your auntie? I said, "Oh no, she doesn't know anything." Right? Well, I did interview her, and she had the best story in the whole world. It was an unbelievably blissful story about first having initiations from him. So this is what's so amazing. This is a little old humble, little old fat Nepalese nun, an auntie, an Annie, a nun, nobody, And they don't talk about their experiences if no one asks. We go, vomiting out anything, you know. She would never tell her experiences, so he even does her own niece, her own nephew. Oh, she doesn't know anything, he said. So I just stick my nose in and ask. Her story is amazing. I want to read her story. Chapter 2, the difference between earth and sky. The place, I'll just keep it brief. This is also tenses over talking, and it's getting her to tell her story. So anyway, she'd been a nun since she was a little girl. Auntie Children vividly recalls the event that she was a little girl, that she had to help the family, and she had to work, you know. And then when my mother died, Children was 13, she was forced to go back home and to work for the family. I was stuck for another 12 years, she said. So Auntie Children vividly recalls the event that led to her freedom. It was the late summer of 1968. She was 23. Rinchen Wangchuk, this is her talking, the auntie. Rinchen Wangchuk had invited, Rinchen Wangchuk's the monk who met him first, invited 6 of the Lugompa senior monks and 4 of the senior Ratchen nuns to do puja at our house. And they were all sitting around the prayer room afterwards drinking tea when Rinchen Wangchuk told them he had something important to say. The reason I asked you to gather here today is to announce that I have met a highly realized yogi up near Ganden Gompa. I've been receiving teachings from him for a couple of years now. He said that in the beginning he'd observed him closely and eventually gained great faith in this yogi. He is truly realized, truly qualified. I tell you, we have never met such a highly realized being in all our lives. He is incredible. We were so excited, Auntie Children said. I felt so honoured to think that a holy being would be living so close to us. So Rinchen Wangchuk told them that this yogi was Tibetan. He'd studied at Sera Monastery, one of the 3 greats, the Glug monastic universities in Lhasa. Then, after his escape in 59, came to the Cave of the Doves and has meditated in isolation. And he lived there without clothes, without food, without sleep. Can you imagine it? Just like Milarepa. Children and the others were amazed. They knew about Milarepa, but to hear about a person living like that in their own time was hard to imagine. It seems that he was this, and this is her talking, it seems that he was the so-called Yeti we all heard about. He is the one that the Bushi, oh, this is Rinchen Wangchuk, he is the one the Bushi villagers threw out. He'd been there for nearly 6 years. He said that he'd moved to some juniper trees after that, when he stayed for another year, and they chased him away from there too, and then he found his way to Ganden Gompa, Ganden Mountain, early in 1966. I met him a year after that, Rinchen Wangchuk told him. He's been to many holy places in Tibet and India, yet he came here to caves near our village on the instructions of his guru, Trijang Rinpoche, the junior tutor of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We are so blessed. Rinchen Wangchuk told them that he himself had received many, many teachings and initiations from this yogi, and that it had a profound effect on his practice. He's given me the Vajrayogini initiation and an extensive commentary on the practice over several months. All his teachings are experiential. Just hearing his words, your heart is moved. He is such a holy being. He made me vow to tell no one, but I feel you must meet him. You must receive teachings and initiations from him. I chose all of you. You are the right people. You are ready for him. Auntie Children was deeply moved by Rinchen Wangchuk's words, and she felt so honoured. She could not believe her good fortune. She'd been sincerely practicing since she was a young girl. She'd sacrificed her life as a nun to her family, and now this amazing opportunity. But you must keep silent about this. If you feel you are ready, we can go to see him tomorrow, and I will confess to him that I revealed his secret. They were all so excited. How fortunate we are. Such good karma we must have. Even though our village is so remote with few lamas, this yogi has come here. Thank you, Rinchen Wangchuk, we are so honoured. They all agreed they wanted to go to see the lama the next day. There was no time to waste. Good, said Rinchen Wangchuk. Each of you can bring a handful of offerings, whatever you want to give, to create auspiciousness. Next morning, Children and the others woke up early, well before dawn. Most of the group had stayed over at the house, all squeezed into the prayer room. Rinchen Wangchuk instructed everyone to make very rich buttered tea and to bring it in their flasks to offer the yogi. Children also brought some butter, and she carefully wrapped the special porcelain cup used for lamas. Some brought silk, salt, others brought grain, and one had a woolen carpet. They all had offering scarves. They walked up the mountain together, the 11 of them, Rinchen Wangchuk and Pasang Tsering leading the way. They were silent but excited, full of anticipation. They arrived exactly as the sun was reaching the cave, which was their plan. They felt this was very auspicious. The yogi must have known they were coming. When they arrived, he was standing in front of the cave, waiting. I was so nervous I was shaking, Churden remembers, and I was shocked at what I saw. He was huge, far bigger than any of us. His clothes were filthy, black almost, and they were rags. I could tell they were monks' robes, but it was just bits and pieces of robe. He wasn't wearing a donka, just a bit of cloth wrapped around his shoulders. His hair was down his back, thick and matted, sticking out wildly. His face was very wrinkled and rough. She said he looked worse than the poorest beggar she had ever seen. She could not believe that this was a holy being. He stood there, his presence so powerful, saying nothing. All the lamas I had met before seemed clean and poised. They would smile nicely to greet you and say sweet words. This man just stood there, fierce, staring at us. I didn't know what to think. But he had captured her, she said. I knew I couldn't escape from this person. He had me. But I honestly did not know whether I could cope with this. Rinchen Wangchuk introduced them. They are from Mugompa and Ratchengompa. They would like to request initiations and teachings from you, great yogi, especially Vajrayogini. I decided I had to tell them about you. They all want the teachings so badly. They are ready. They are sincere. We were all bent low, looking down, too scared to meet his face, Churden said. Then the yogi turned his eyes to us and spoke. Since you have a monastery, why'd you come here? He was so blunt, so direct. None of us said anything. Luckily, Rinchen Wangchuk spoke for us. They sincerely want to follow you exactly as I have done, and they have promised that the word will not get out. He stood there silent. It seemed for ages, Churden said. Then he spoke, strongly, clearly. If you dedicate your entire life to practice without breaking your commitments for even one day, I will accept your request. My heart was beating fast. I was so happy, Auntie Churden said. Have you all received the highest Yoga Tantra initiation? If you haven't, I can't give you Vajrayogini, he said. Yes, Rinchen Wangchuk said, they've all received initiations. They are all qualified. The yogi invited them to sit down. They prostrated 3 times, each making their offerings, and then sat down on the ground, squashed tight together in the small space in front of the cave. I unwrapped the porcelain cup, Churden said, and held it out for each person to pour some tea into it from their flasks. I then offered it to the yogi. He led the blessing, chanting the nectar offering prayer to Vajrayogini. He sat there, serious, drinking his tea, but was very sweet, humble, and very relaxed. But now we had relaxed a bit by now too. Rinchen Wangchuk requested the yogi to allow everyone to take a taste of his tea for a blessing. He allowed them. Anyway, we have created a very auspicious connection. We dedicate this for liberation in this one lifetime, he said. They drank their hot butter tea in silence. Now you can go, the yogi said. I will let Rinchen Wangchuk know when the initiation will be. One of the nuns, Yangdong, was especially delighted. She knew the yogi. She didn't say a word at the cave, but told the others later. He had come to her family's house years ago when she was a young girl. It must have been the middle of 1959, the year Tibetans had escaped from their country. Of course, he looked very different then, but he was unmistakable. I was carrying water back from Lungbu, and I noticed this big monk walking towards my house. He came to the front door and called out, "Hey, anyone there?" My mother invited him in and offered him roasted barley flour. He asked her if he could keep his things at her house. "I only have some texts, nothing for you to worry about," he told her. There was a fatherly feeling about him. I thought how nice it would be to have him stay with us. I could just spend time with him. But he left. My mother really took good care of that book bag of his, which she kept in our prayer room. A couple of months later, she said, she was again returning from Lungbu with water when some kids called out to her, "There's a big Tibetan monk in your house." I knew it was him and I was so happy. I ran all the way back. Amma, is it the big Tibetan monk?" "Yes, but he took his things and left." I felt such a feeling of loss. I ran in that direction that I'd seen him coming from earlier to try to find him. I looked towards the route to Tibet, but I couldn't see him. He was gone. They started their retreat a week later, on the 25th of the 11th Tibetan month, a special Vajrayogini day. Rinchen Wangchuk and Pasang Tsering had brought the various ritual implements and prepared the cave. The yogi looked just the same. He sat on a throne made of grass, piled a foot high. The rest of them sat on scattered grass to soften the hardness of the rock. He said, I've done the self-initiation, so now we can begin. The initiation took 3 days. They all stayed at the nomad huts, a 15-minute walk away. First he recited the preliminary practices, stopping and giving instructions each step of the way. The moment he started to teach, his words hit our hearts, Chögyam said. I was in tears. I received Vajrayogini from other lamas, but the difference was like earth and sky. He gave the commentary on the practice every day until the 10th of the 12th month, 15 days later. We had 2 sessions of commentary every day. The first just after sunrise for 3 hours, then after lunch another session, another 3 hours. Sometimes they would sit around the cave together doing the practice. The yogi had to do his special 4 sessions of meditation every day, as well as teach us. He seemed to be doing many different practices together. I could tell from the recitations that he was doing the Nyungne practice too. They could also hear that he would recite all the major practices, Guri Samaja, Yamataka, Haruka Chakramavara, as well as Vajrayogini. We could hear his powerful and beautiful chanting, but if he noticed our presence, he would chant quietly. He was so humble. This was the most special time of my life. And the point is, he memorized everything. One old Lama who was in Tibet didn't get arrested, but for 19 years he sat on one bed, unmoving, for 19 years, pretending to be an invalid. But his woman upstairs come from the potty for him to pee in. For 19 years, with not a single possession. One little tiny mala in a hidden pocket just there. Was if the Chinese had found him, he would have imprisoned him. And he had everything in his mind. They memorized everything. All the texts, all the practices, all the sadhanas. They're like walking computers. So he sat and did his practices for 19 years. And when he came out of Tibet, he'd sat for so long in this dark room, he couldn't cope with the light. And he couldn't walk very well. 19 years on one seat. Not imprisoned. He chose it. They're very amazing, these people. This was the most special time of my life, Chögyam said. The 11 of us, whenever we would see each other in the coming years, the first word out of our mouths was always to recall those incredible 2 weeks with our precious Lama. Without doubt, for every one of us, it was the most memorable, most meaningful, the happiest days of our lives. They all felt unbelievably proud and privileged, so special. Until the end of their lives, they always expressed this. The months when they passed away, Chögyam said, they all died with very auspicious signs. They all kept their practice purely. They completed their great retreat for 3 years. They lived a life strictly following the Lama's advice. They died with confidence in their practice. Everyone in the village praised them. For all of them, she said, he became their main guru, their heart Lama, just naturally. You couldn't compare him with anyone else. His way of teaching was unbelievable. When he moved down to Kathmandu, he lived in Kopan the last 20 years of his life, she did retreat in his hut, 3-year retreat. But there she was, a little old fat auntie. No, she doesn't know anything, he said. Just a second. For me, in the book, I worked on this book for a couple of years. That's the story that blew my mind, touches my heart deeply. Every time I read it, I'm almost in tears. It was an amazing old lady, completely silent, just looked like a little servant, a practitioner. Unbelievable. And you don't tell people your experiences, you don't get asked. No one had ever asked her, ever. No one had ever asked her. It came out very humbly when I asked her. Any questions? Questions? Nothing. Well, let's go back to emptiness. Back to emptiness, okay?
Yep.
So it's another little exercise to try to prove that we don't need a separate little I. In other words, we don't need what we think is in there running the show. Now, look at our language. Look at how we think every day. I did this, and I ran this, and I feel this, and I fixed this, and I did that. So this is the interesting point too. When we say a word, When we say a word, that word is the expression of a thought. And that word, if it's a valid word, which means it's a valid thought, which means it's a valid concept, there has to be a phenomenon that does exist, like we talked before, that is a valid object of that word. You have to be able to point to it. Do you hear what I'm saying? You have to point to it, and that has to be a separate, individual, precise thing. This is really simple logic. So like I said, if I say I have a clock, there's a clock. Right there, clock. I have a nose, there's a nose. Nose, there it is, nose. We talk, our language, we have to do the analysis, we talk like the I, that there is a person, like a special part of us in there, there's like a mini-me basically, that runs the show. That's what they say, that he was like a puppeteer, or like, they even call the analysis like a head salesman. There's slightly different variations of this, but it's like we're conflating a bit, never mind. But it's like there is a part, and the point is, when we hear our language properly and do the analysis of our language, language is thoughts, so that's what we have to analyse, the way we talk. I decided to do that. Okay, we say, I am watching my breath. Don't we? I am watching my breath. So we even, you have the idea, people talk about, there's a kind of witness in there, they say. Like there's an I watching the breath. I made myself come back to the breath. I nearly fell asleep. I did this. You see, there are words, we get it. We understand. So all Buddha's saying is, we don't realise, but that we have over-embellished, we have over-exaggerated that I, and have made it, and have given it its own separate status. That's exactly what they mean by a soul. It is a separate thing that is separate. That's on the grossest level of the mistake, the Buddha says. So we think that about the I, you know. Self, I, soul, same logic. So, let's do a little analysis, a little workshop to prove not only that there isn't a separate little I who runs the show like the boss, but you just don't need one. There's a little analysis, okay? So, you know, I always do the same one. I make a statement, you know. I make a statement. I'm holding a mala in my right hand. It could be any statement. I'm walking up a mountain. It could be anything we want to say. A little statement. I'm holding a mala in my right hand. So conventionally speaking, without any analysis, we accept that it's a valid statement. Robina is indeed holding a mala in her right hand. You know, if I said I'm holding the elephant in my right hand, it would be right. So conventionally, without analysis, but what we don't realise, that conventional truth, we're embellishing it. We're making it more than it is. So this is the point. I say, I am holding a mala. I am holding a mala. So let's look at it. So my point is this. Let's say I've forgotten how to do it. I've had a stroke or something, you know. Lost my memory. Lost all my coordination. So you have to teach me again. So you have a lot of work to do, wouldn't you? Even if you have to write down the instructions that I had to do. So even if you had to, you know, you see what I'm saying? So if we're trying to analyse now, this is analysing dependent arising in terms of parts. So what we've got to do is look into Robina and look at all the parts that play a role in the holding of a mala in my right hand. Can you hear this? So I have to start writing down all the parts of the body, wouldn't I? The body is the one that's doing it. So you have to write down, the thumb has to do this, and the ring finger does that, and the pinky does this, and the ligaments have to be this way, and the joints are doing this, and the skin is this. You understand? And really have a really definitive list, wouldn't you? And if you really had a completely definitive list, it's like IKEA, you know. You'd have to have all those parts exactly correct. Would you not, true? That's a logical analysis, isn't it? Everyone would have its job, and they'd all work together to do their job. And I have to train myself to do it again, wouldn't I? Just to make my hand do the right job. So you'd see there'd be a long list of parts. The knuckles of this, and the thumb of this, and the ligaments of this, and the nerves, and the elbow, and that, and the shoulder this way, that muscle this way. And all these millions of pieces all connected. Do you agree with this? Do you agree with this? There'd be a big list, wouldn't you agree? A big list of parts, first of the body. All doing their job, beautifully, working hand in hand together. Now, the other part of Robina, that's clearly the main part, is the mind. If this is a dead body, don't bother. So what are the parts of the mind that are all playing their role? So that's very precise. The main parts are going to be what I call the mechanics. There's no virtue in this, there's no non-virtue, maybe there's a bit of attachment, so I'll try and prove myself. But really, it's like there has to be, first of all, there has to be ear consciousness so I can hear your instructions. There has to be eye consciousness so I can see what's going on. There has to be, tongue is not involved, tactile is involved, ears involved, and eyes involved, but not tongue and not nose. Do you agree with that? So 3 of my senses have to be involved. That's a lot. Then you have to have the mental consciousness, and you've got, the first one would be intention, and that's happening every second. I will do what you say. I will put the thumb there. That's intention. That's intention. Put the thumb there, do that. If you want a boss, intention is the boss. It's a thought. Then you've got attention. I've got to pay attention. Then I have to have discrimination to distinguish between that one and this one. Then I have to have alertness to catch what's. Then I have to have good memory, like called mindfulness, so I don't forget what I'm doing. There are many parts of my mind, each of them doing their job. Can you understand? Like a building, each of the things does their job to hold up the building. The screws here, the wood there, and it's all very precise. The same with the parts of Robina. There probably will be hundreds. Are we in communication here? Yes. There are many parts of the mind, and there are many parts of the body. Do you agree? Mm-hmm. And they all do their job, and they're all going to be coordinated now. Now, the question is this. The question is this. What job is left over that is not being done by all those parts of the body and by all those parts of the mind? What job is left over for the poor little me that's feeling left out? What job would an eye do that the hand doesn't do, the thumb doesn't do, the pinky doesn't do, the elbow doesn't do, the mindfulness doesn't do, the intention doesn't do, the attention doesn't do? You understand my point here? What role is that we believe there is a part called I? So what role would it have that the others aren't doing? That's the question. Any suggestions?
Nothing.
Huh?
Nothing.
No, true, easy to say, but yes. But what we tend to think, isn't it, that the I is the manager that coordinates all the other parts and makes the decision and makes everything do its job. That's how we think, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, if there is that, what is it, where is it, and how does it function? We have to locate it. Do you understand? Yeah. So the Buddha, what he's saying is, if you want a boss, the boss is intention, and that's in the mind, so that's covered. So there's body. So in other words, we don't need a boss. The parts do fine working together. And the coordination has done by the mind. Discrimination, the mind. Intention, the mind. Attention, the mind. Memory, the mind. Feeling, the mind. Tactile, the mind. The mind and the body work. In fact, the body is a dumb animal. The real work is done by the mind. And it tells the body what to do. But we think that there's an I on top that coordinates. That's exactly the same philosophy as a creator. We don't need a creator. The individuals in samsara do fine without being bossed around. We create our own happiness and we create our own suffering. Well, the parts do fine. Are we communicating here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Where do thoughts come from? Is that mind? Is that
that's thought. Thought is mind, yeah.
It's one of the, like that, the action or volition or...
Oh, that's mind. Consciousness. One of the parts of your consciousness, yeah.
So when you hear the thoughts in your mind, like someone speaking, let's say, that would be...
Be loud, darling.
The thoughts that you hear in your mind...
Yes.
Who would be hearing, or what part of...
Okay, good question. Good. So, I am watching my breath. Well, the question... Okay, good. I am holding a mala. Well, very simple. Which part of me is holding a mala? Which part of my hand? The thumb, the thinking, the this, like we discussed. So I, in other words, is a convenient name we give to the bits. It doesn't have a separate status, it's merely a name. That's the final one. It's merely a label we give to the bits. But we think there's a status that the I has. We've over-embellished it. So I'm watching my breath. No, we get so confused by that. And then we go, which part of my I is watching my breath? My mind. Well, then we go, oh, or even if I'm watching my mind. Oh, you mean my mind is watching my mind? Oh, that's a bit cosmic. Well, no, which part of my mind? Just like you said, Andrew. The key part that does the looking, if you're watching your breath, the key part of your mind is called attention. But then it gets scattered, it wanders off. So mindfulness, which is not forgetting what you're doing, it's a crucial piece of your mind. And then there's another piece called attention, another piece called intention. All these bits, all doing their bit. It's like all the thumb and the fingers are doing their bit. But because it all happens spontaneously, we don't notice which bit does which bit. But when it's working beautifully, they all do their bits. So all these parts of your mind are working together to help attention become concentrated. But we think it's I who does it. No, it's just over-exaggeration of the status of the I. With me? So and that's where we give it power because we believe there is the boss in there, like the mini-me running the show. We have to articulate it. That's how it would sound. And that's what you feel when you get hurt or insulted or offended or feel anxious or depressed. You don't say, oh, my mind is depressed. You say, I'm depressed. You don't say, I nearly fell off the mountain. You didn't. Your body didn't. We're not precise. And that's why that story of Robert drowning. He said, the head was coming to the surface for air. He didn't say, I was coming to the surface for air. He was being very precise. The head did the job. And that's a good type of practice to do. The way they talk about the mind, they say, anger thinks that. Jealousy thinks this. They give status to each of the parts of the mind. We say, I am jealous. So it increases this clinging to an I. And then we overstate the I and think it's a jealous I and an angry I and a disgusting I. It's overstating it. So it's a really good practice to look at the individual parts of your mind and see which job they all do. Just like what is the job of the thumb, What's the job of the finger? What's the job of attention, intention, love, compassion? You be more precise. And then, when he said, I said to myself, the person known as the Laudo Lama is about to die. He didn't say, I am about to die, but it was precise. And this is a really powerful point to make when you're doing the analysis internally. So this is the point. As Lama Zopa says, the name I can't be the base. This is a huge discussion we have to do. We think this is me. We either think there's a little mini-me in there running everything, or the whole of it is me. Both are mistaken. Because if this all were me, then that means as many bits that I can identify would be as many me's. Because if you say all of it, if you say, okay, my mind is me, then you'd say, I have a mind. Well, if I means mind, then you're saying mind has a mind. Redundant, unnecessary. So the name, Robina, cannot be the base. So the aggregates, the body and mind, are the parts, the base of the label I. So Robina is the person, so I am the person known as Robina. So of course, as Geshe Tokchö, my philosophy teacher, Geshe Tokchö said, you don't go around saying, someone says, hello, who are you? Oh, I'm the person known as Robina. Just shut up and say Robina. Because you don't buy into it. You say, I'm the person known as Robina. It's kind of very precise, very accurate. It's powerful to practice like that. To break things down, to remove ourselves from... I mean, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and never say the word I, that's nice. But you don't give it this extra status. Like you practice not giving it this extra status. That's everything, we give it extra status. That's what ego grasping does. They over-embellish everything. So of course this argument here only goes so far. So then we say, if we do this argument and we realise there's no I among the parts, we then go, oh, well, at least I've got some parts. That's not the final argument yet. No. Because parts is the name given to the base. So I've got an ear then? No. Ear is merely a name given to its base. The lobe and the this. Oh, you mean I've got an earlobe? No. Earlobe is merely a name given to its base, the flap. Oh, then flap, I've got a flap. No. I've got skin. No. I've got an atom. No. Every time you say that is a name that you give to that base. It's not playing games, it's very powerful. So you'll never find even a part, because a part is also merely labelled. Everything is merely labelled. That's why Rinpoche says when we understand merely labelled, which is the subtlest dependent arising, when we really understand that, we've understood there is no inherent I, me, you, toe, pee-pee, caca, or anything else. And when we understand that, it's as if there's no I, me, pee-pee, caca, or anything else, but there is. Dependent arising, me, I, pee-pee, caca. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't. And this is a really powerful way to think, you know. Hear the words and try to put meat on those bones. Then we'll never fall into the abyss of the great mistake. So and of course, more and more we do this, the more our mind becomes stable. Less attachment, less aversion, less neurosis, less depressed. That's the benefit.
So is there an aspect of the mind that hears the thought? Because that's often the...
No, of course, yeah, no, that's your ear consciousness. No, okay. Yes, of course there is. Of course, look this way. Of course there is. Of course there is. So then we have these many parts, the mechanics, you know. Yeah. They're the bits and pieces that do the work. So there's attention. Attention is the one that hones in on something. So it has to be supported by, there's a piece called discrimination. That's the part that can say this is this and this is that. Discrimination. That's got to be supported by mindfulness. That's got to be supported by alertness. That's got to be supported by another one. All the fingers together will hold the cup. Each one has its job. So the same with the mind. Each one has its job. Discrimination is the crucial piece that can distinguish between this and that, long and short, red and pink, and eventually in the mind, good or bad. Discrimination is the key one that can see the difference. That's the wisdom we have to develop. Discrimination that can distinguish between anger or love. That's discrimination. That's a huge one that has to be cultivated. Go on.
So then, I don't know if I know enough about discrimination, but then what I imagine is that discrimination then would hear...
Can't hear you, darling.
Discrimination then, I think, would then...
No, that's kind of...
That's a thought.
They're all thoughts, but they're all thoughts, and they're all working together to have an experience.
So from like what I...
So that's called discrimination.
Yeah. But then
combined with others can recognise a thought when it's thought.
So the theory that I've heard is that because you're discriminating and can hear that thought...
What, dear?
Because you discriminate and can hear that thought...
Well, you don't hear a thought. No, you hear...
So then
Okay. We don't technically hear a thought because there's no sound.
Yeah.
But this is why concepts are so fascinating. We have a thought, and awareness is in there, and cognition is there. Cognition is general awareness. Then all the awareness has all these bits and pieces that all work together to have the cognition. So they all work together, and then the cognition is we can hear our own thoughts. Some self-awareness. It's quite hard to say, as Holly said one time in one book about the mind, it's easier to say all these words, but to start to actually get the direct experience of how the mind is, it's kind of mind-boggling if you can't taste it, touch it, smell it, or see it. Do you understand? It's kind of fascinating. And even the way they describe in the epistemological model of the mind how the concepts work, it's beyond insane. So, for example, our mind is full of these billions and billions of phenomena that we've stored away in our mind. So what happens is this. When I look at this cup, I look at the shape and colour, and in a millisecond I say cup. What just happened was, 1,000,000 times quicker than Google, what happened was, all the phenomena that I've stored in my mind, every single phenomenon that isn't a cup, arose in my mind, and then that was eliminated, and what was left, so that's called non-cup. So all the non-cups pop up in my mind, it's a process of elimination, and they're all turned away, and then what arises and what's left is non-cup equals cup. So we don't really cognize a cup. It's a really abstract way that conceptuality works. It's incredibly fascinating. We just think we're seeing a cup. We think we're cognizing a cup. It's a mental image in our mind that we've remembered. And we see that shape and colour, and we impute that upon that shape and colour. But it all happens so brilliantly and so quickly. And that's why these great yogis, in the subtlety of their own meditation, they've observed how the mind works. And that's how they've articulated all this in the teachings. It's not from the brain, it's from the internal cognitive process itself. It's incredibly fascinating. So when you read the commentaries, there are a few of them published, it's like just not being rude to Dutch people, it's double Dutch. It's so confusing, it's so complex, it's so fascinating how the conceptuality works. So conceptuality, the Buddhists use, is a very gross level. It's only knowledge about things. It's not actual direct knowledge of it. That's why they say, until we've accessed the subtle level of our mind in single point of concentration and gone beyond concepts, then we access what they call perception. There's a very clearly, obviously a very particular definition in Buddhist psychology. Direct perception is the part of our mental consciousness at a subtler level when conceptuality has completely ceased, and we only can access that in single point of concentration. So that's abstract for us because we have no equivalent, you know, the best we can do. So an analogy for that, a simple analogy, it seems to me, would be the recipe is the theoretical view and the taste of the cake is the experience. You can't describe an experience, but you can get the cake. You can have the experience by having the recipe. So recipe is merely conceptual. It's a really simple, kind of simplistic analogy. So experiential knowledge is how they talk about it. Direct perception, experiential knowledge. And I got a feeling we get that. Knowing the theory of the music and playing the music. Knowing the theory about something, it's a simple analogy, you know. So we only have theoretical knowledge about everything. So what we have to do is, through meditation, make it genuine. And even in daily life, every time we hear the teachings, every time a penny drops, we go, oh, I get that. You get a taste of impermanence. You get a taste of emptiness. That's the beginning of an experience of it, not just theoretical. When it touches the heart, you could say, that's an experience. So we've got to triple and billion times multiply that experience until it's genuine experiential knowledge. And when we've got that of emptiness, it can never lose it. You can never lose it. You're beginning to get out of samsara, now you're going to fall back. Because then it informs everything you now do from now on. So we've got to start with the conceptual, you know. And that leads to the non-conceptual, that leads to the experiential. So they say.
Robina, there's Sunday morning meditations. There's Sunday morning meditations.
Yes.
That are held here at the Atisha Centre. There's one of the monks, I won't name who it is, runs this meditation, and he gets us to visualise sitting on a seat in a park and seeing the people go by but not getting involved with them, just let them go by. And it's like a detachment in a way. But then he says, now it's your consciousness that's aware of those people that you're, letting go by, but not getting involved with the story. But then he goes beyond that in the second part of the meditation, and he says, who is it that's observing? The observer of the observer.
Then?
Yeah,
So what's your question? What's the question, darling?
My question is, what's he saying?
Have you asked him?
No.
Well, you better then. What does he say about the observer? What does he say about the observer?
He says there's an observer, like your mind's the observer.
Just a minute, is there observers? Wait.
You're conscious of, the observer is your consciousness.
Okay, so then?
Yeah. And then go beyond that consciousness and there's another observer of that.
He says that.
He does that.
He says there is.
Yes.
Is this man a Buddhist?
Yeah. Yes.
Who is it?
Probably awareness of awareness. Is
That's the
something
one.
like that?
Awareness
Yeah.
of awareness.
So then the question?
Awareness
Who
of
gives the
awareness.
teachings? Who is it?
Yeshi.
It might be Yeshi, yeah. Yeah.
So what's your problem? What's the problem?
Well, my problem is, well, yeah, I suppose you could call it a question for sure.
Well, if it's not a question, there's no point in talking about it. So what's the question?
What's he mean?
Darling, I don't know why.
Observer.
How often have you done this meditation?
They all take it in turns.
I understand. How often have you done this meditation with him?
About 3 or 4 times.
And you've never bothered to ask him?
I haven't had an opportunity, no.
Well, you just, what do you mean, opportunity? You're in the class, just put your hand up and ask.
Well, that the forum isn't to ask questions, really.
Who said? You mean you're not allowed to ask questions? You mean it says no questions?
Generally, they do the meditation, they're off.
Excuse me, where does it say you can't ask questions?
No, I don't know.
Well, then you're just afraid to put your hand up because you're embarrassed.
No, not really.
Excuse me, then you just said there's no opportunity. If you put your hand up before he walks out, he'll answer your question. May I suggest, sweetheart? May I suggest that? Just for you to think about that. Why are you being puzzled with what I'm saying?
Well, because I want to understand.
Sweetheart, I'm asking you why you have to ask him a question. That's my real concern about you, not your question. I can't answer. It's up to him to tell you what he means. And I think the first thing, I'm a bit shocked that you feel ashamed or embarrassed to ask a question. Don't you say there's no opportunity to ask questions. Of course there's an opportunity. It's bizarre, forgive me, but it's very bizarre that you think there's no opportunity. Of course there is. You put your hand up and say, may I ask a question? Am I wrong? Am I wrong in what I'm suggesting?
Well, I've been a bit busy after the meditation.
Well, then don't say there's no opportunity. But don't ask me what you mean. You have to ask him, darling. I mean, that's really, really, really important. And it's a completely valid question. I can't answer. I'm not him. You have to ask him what he means. It's completely obvious, sweetheart. May I suggest that you kindly do that next time, so you're clear what he means? Is that a good suggestion? Please, sweetie, is it a good suggestion?
Yes, it is.
Good. Please do it next time. And you can tell me his answer next time I see you. Yes.
I think it might have been calm abiding.
Tony, I don't care. I'm talking to her, and I've got a very good reason for saying it exactly the way I'm saying. I know exactly what she's talking about, but I'm not going to answer her question. It's Yeshi's job to answer her question.
Yes, but it's too high a level, obviously, for someone to be practicing.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Tony, shut up and sit down. I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I have one more thing to say.
Tony, honey, what I'm saying is, excuse me, your humility or your fear of speaking is your problem. The fact that you don't know what he means, you've done it 3 times, and you're a bit shocked by it. But the first thing to me is to ask the question. That is the most obvious point in my mind. May I suggest that to you?
Yes.
I will not answer your question because I don't know Tony, I don't know Yeshi, I don't know what he's saying. You have to ask him. Please, I request you to do that. Or you just be patient and humble and slowly you'll understand. Do you understand my point? Please do that. Don't you? I mean, you want to know the answer. You're asking me, aren't you? But you want to know the answer.
Oh, yeah, I do.
You want to know the answer.
Well, you were talking earlier.
I know, but you hear me. You want to know the answer.
Subtle consciousness.
You want to know the answer.
Of course I do.
So you must ask him. What? I don't know why this is such a surprise to you.
I haven't gotten around to it yet, but I will.
But you hear my point. Thank you. Ask him. What else? What else?
I'm kind of with Fran on that one.
With Fran on what one?
On that, because the
Excuse me, how come you haven't asked him either?
I'm going to tell you. Honestly, the monk that we ask.
The person who leads the meditation, I'm asking.
Yes.
Have you asked him?
Been there too with him.
Have you asked him what he means?
You do, but he just
Waves
waves away, pushes you away. Because he is a specific.
What?
I can't say.
Excuse me, people, I think all these projections, I'm getting a bit overwhelmed here. What are you telling me? What are you, now being very sincere with the purest motivation, what are you telling me? I'm happy, I want to hear it, it's really good for all of us for communication. So say it with a good motivation. Tell me what your perception of the experience is. I need to hear it. You need to hear it actually. So tell me what you're saying, darling. It's important. It is important. What's your perception?
The monk.
Yeshi. His name's Yeshi, I think. We're talking about Yeshi, aren't we?
Yes.
So Yeshi, tell me about it.
He has now got to a level where he is a lot higher than he was a year ago.
Excuse me, this is a big story in your mind about your projection onto this person called Yeshi. I'd like to hear from you facts, not opinions. Try and distinguish between facts and opinions. To say that I think he's higher than he was a year ago is a very fascinating
He's done a meditation
opinion.
on me before.
What, sweetheart?
He's done a meditation on
I can't
me.
hear you, darling. Please, I need to hear your words carefully.
He's done a meditation on me to make a point.
On you.
There is things in
Sorry,
my
you just said
life.
he's done a meditation on me.
Yes,
What does this mean, precious?
because in my past I've done some stuff that he would never know about.
And so then what has he done?
He's been my mentor for about 2
He's what, sweetheart?
years.
He's what, darling?
He's been my guru mentor for 2 years. I brought something up, and there's no way he would ever have known that.
So what is your point, precious
My
one?
point is that he has looked into my past, saw it,
And then?
used it in the meditation
And
against me to tell me to try and make a point that that was stupid. I
So
know
you
that.
think that's what's happening, do you?
Yes.
May I suggest something, darling? May I suggest?
You need to talk.
May I suggest something? May I suggest something you'd like to hear? I've really got a feeling, I'm not sure, but I think I hear a lot of ideas of yours about this person that maybe aren't perhaps quite valid or accurate. I'm not so sure. But you believe very strongly that your story is correct, don't you? You just give me an assessment of a certain scenario and you feel quite confident that your assessment is accurate. Would you say that? Is it possible for you to really assess that and check to see if it is valid? Or you want to believe what you just said? Do you understand my point, sweetheart? Because it seems to me you're feeling very hurt by this. You feel he's done something to you, to hurt you, very personally. You feel he's betrayed you. Is that what you're suggesting? And you're really quite convinced that's true, are you, darling? You're quite convinced. You're really quite convinced you're accurate. Definitely, nothing will change your mind. Nothing. You are convinced you're right. Have you ever asked him if it's true? Have you asked him his opinion about it? Sweetheart.
Yes, I asked, have I done something to offend you?
And what did he say?
He said, no, that's just your deluded mind.
And what do you think?
Well, I know exactly, I can't say it because I don't think we're allowed to.
What, precious one? What, darling? What, sweetheart?
He's higher than in line.
Is he?
Yes.
Okay, so then what, if he is, you should be very happy. You should be very delighted. If he is that side. But I suggest you check up carefully. I think we have a lot of ideas that maybe, Buddha's suggesting we have some ideas that maybe aren't always valid. So I just want to suggest to you, you might be right, but it's good to check carefully to see if you are right. Do you understand, precious? Darling? Are we communicating? Yeah? Good. Thank you so much. Time for dinner. Any questions? More questions? No? Oh, yes, we have.
You mentioned there are 6 realms.
Yeah.
What were they?
2 of the gods. There are 2 lots of gods. Right? Oh, I say them all, I'll say them again. There's the top suburbs where the best pleasure is, are called the God realms. And they're like blissful, light bodies with incredibly blissful experience and the direct result of lots of virtue. Then the next level of gods, it's very funny, they call them the jealous gods. So the analogy on the planet, if you think about some people who've got blissful lives, very happy, very delighted, everything's perfect, then you have lots of other rich people that have nightmarish lives. They're jealous and fighting. That's a kind of a high realm, a high rebirth, but very intense. Then you've got humans, that's the 3 top ones. Then you've got the animals, the spirits, and the whole beings. All on the realm of existence of different types of mind. And it's the last, you understand what I'm saying? That's something like that.
Thank you.
And these are all living real beings, not just pretend, you know. Well, okay, let's think about dinner. Food. And think of it, if we think of emptiness. So, using the 2 truths, there is on the plate labelled carrots, lentils, soup, whatever we label it, and that's an accurate label. You can't say it's carrot soup if it's pear soup. So we'd be accurate. We give it an accurate conventional label. But then, like Buddha's saying, what we don't realise we're doing, we are overinflating the status of that label. We're giving it, of the soup, the lentils, the carrots, whatever, we give it more existence than it really has. That's what delusion causes. So what we have to do is try and see the absence of that fantasy on those carrots, on those lentils. That's the way to say it. So we think, therefore, they are not existing like that. Therefore, they are empty of intrinsic nature. So we imagine them all manifesting in the blissful container in the sky, and we bless all this delicious nectar with Om Ahum, Om Ahum, Om Ahum, the 3 syllables that represent enlightened body, speech, and mind. So now the main merit is to offer, so we visualize all the gurus, all the Buddhas, and all the suffering sentient beings, pervading space. And then, as Lama Zopa says, the best way to imagine this, the most powerful meaning of the word to offer, is to visualize all these holy beings, all these sentient beings, experiencing the joy of receiving this delicious nectar that we so happily offer them. Lama Sangye, Lama Che, Dejen Lama Gedon Te, Kungi Jeba Lama Te, Lama Namla, Che Pa Pu,